You guys, you lucky guys, we're back. Blue White Breakdown podcast time. Johnny McGonigal and myself, Bob Flounders, here to talk. We're recording this Tuesday at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Scorching hot, but what do you expect from, the middle of July? I'm here for it, Johnny. How are you doing? I know I was away last week. I know there's some recruiting news we need to get to. I want to just touch briefly on what's happening at Northwestern, and then to close it out, Johnny, let's talk about some things Penn State football wise as we get closer and closer to the start of August camp. But how you doing? What's new on the recruiting trail?
I'm good, Bob. Yeah, you missed the commit when you were away with Penn State, getting 4-star Monsignor Bonner defensive end Mylachi Williams, a big addition for their class. If you want me to just go into it right now with Mylachi, might as well, right? Like that's
Is this a Deion Barnes influence here, or is it just all of Penn State, or is this a big one for Deion?
Yeah, it's a big one for Deion. I mean, Penn State, they were on him pretty early. They were the first Power 5 school to offer him back in January. So before Deion ended up, getting elevated to defensive line coach at Penn State. But as a Philly native, both Deion and Mylachi, even though he plays, for Monsignor Bonner out in Drexel Hill outside Philly, he's from Philly.
Yeah.
So Deion had some sway in this for sure. And it's a big one for him. It's a big one for Penn State. Not just because a part of this is because he's a Philly area guy, and that is an area that we've talked about. Ohio State goes in there, Georgia goes in there. Some competitors on the recruiting trail have done a good job in Philadelphia over the years, plucking some of the top talent. But this is, the Philly and Philly surrounding area is one that Penn State has recommitted to over the last few years. They've put Terry Smith in there, who is a Pittsburgh guy, but, was a former assistant at Temple, knows the area well. Deion Barnes's ties, being a Northeast high school grad, helps a lot as well. But look, they now have 3 Philly guys in this 2024 recruiting class, with Mylachi Williams in there now, 4-star wide receiver Tyseer Denmark from Roman Catholic, flipping him from Oregon.
Right.
And they've also got Kenny Wosley, the corner from Imhotep, who I've talked before, I think is, maybe flying under the radar here, even as a 4-star talent in this class. And so it's big from a Philly perspective, big from a keep the best, talent in state home standpoint. They've gotten 8 Pennsylvania guys now in this 2024 class that has 21 members. So that's a pretty good ratio there. They've gone out, they've plucked some top guys from Wisconsin, Florida, Josiah Brown being the top player from New York, and Michigan even with Kari. But you look at the job that James Franklin and his staff have done within the state of Pennsylvania. It's not stunning, but it's also just one of those things that it's good to see that they're keeping some of that top talent home.
Yeah. And I know that Penn State is not done. James Franklin never sleeps anymore. I think he and his staff have been their ability to adjust on the fly, their ability to evaluate talent early, offer early, and get it right, because you see the kids often go up in the recruiting rankings not long after they commit to Penn State. Just very impressive. That he has. It's clear, Johnny, right? I mean, he came to Penn State viewed as a recruiter, and he had some success at Penn State early in his time. But it is definitely ramped up. Recruiting is definitely a different world with NIL and with, staff starting to expand and rule changes, stuff like that, the transfer portal. It's become so much more challenging. And yet it feels like James, maybe not right away, but he's really kind of got a really good plan process in place. And it helps when you go 11-2 and win the Rose Bowl. But also, I just think that I really think that the last 2 or 3 years coming out of the pandemic, I think you could make the case he's done his finest work, and I think it's only going to get better.
Yeah, and on Mylachi specifically too, one other point I wanted to note is Penn State came into June and really into the summer wanting to address wide receiver and address the defensive line. They've done it at wide receiver with Tyseer Denmark, with Peter Gonzalez from Central Catholic, and Josiah Brown from New York, who I mentioned. Defensive line was a position that they needed to hit on in June and now into July, and they've done that. Xavier Gilliam committing early in June. They got DeAndre Cook a couple weeks ago, and now Mylachi in the fold. And they're still going after defensive lineman. Liam Andrews from up in Massachusetts is a 4-star two-way player that they would love to have. A lot of schools would love to have. Jalen Harvey is one that he had originally a July 4th commit date, and it looked like Penn State was the play there, but he has since rescheduled that. So he's a Maryland native. The Terps might be trying to get to him. We'll see how that pans out. A couple of other guys on the radar as well. But, they've done a good job addressing those two positions over the last month plus, and I still think more guys to come too. And then just a quick note too, I mentioned Peter Gonzalez from Central Catholic. Bob, I'm actually here in Pittsburgh as we record this.
You're so lucky. I love that city. I mean, I'm jealous, but I mean, good for you.
Yeah. I came back just to, have some stray belongings in my apartment that I need to still grab, and
you're moving. That's right. Did the fans know you're moving from the western part of the state to the pretty far east, back to your roots in the Philadelphia area, correct?
I am. Yes. Yeah. So that move will be in the coming weeks here, but awesome. Just want to come back to Pittsburgh, see some friends and all that. And while I'm here, my buddies, I lived in Shadyside, which is a 4-minute drive to Central Catholic High School. So I'm like, I kind of wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't pop by Central and talk to Peter Gonzalez and talk to Anthony Specca as well, a 4-star linebacker who's committed to Penn State's class, one of the earliest commits in their class. And so talk to both of them, have a story, depending on when you're coming, when you're listening to this. We're recording this, Tuesday afternoon. Story coming on Gonzalez on Wednesday, and then Specca on Thursday. So be aware of that, PennLive readers and listeners, and some good stuff from those two.
Good looking out. Pittsburgh Central Catholic. I thought I saw something on Twitter. It's kind of an aside, but I think Penn State fans will find it interesting. They have something like 120 kids out for like football, 9 through 12 or something like that. There was video. Like that is a big number in this day and age. I don't know if it's accurate, but you were out there. I don't know if you heard anything about it, but they have a huge turnout this year. Do they not, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I was there for the tail end of a 2.5, 3 hour workout that they had at the high school today. And it's crazy. And they've got other guys, too, on that team. Cole Sullivan is a linebacker who's committed to Michigan in the 24 class. I wouldn't be surprised if they've got guys, 2026 and 2027 guys, in the pipeline. That's just what Central Catholic does. And a lot of WPIAL talent. We talked about what Penn State has in this 24 class already. And Quentin Martin from Bell Vernon. And, it's just, it's an area that produces for Penn State specifically.
Yeah. Good luck messing with Central Catholic the next couple of years. WPIAL teams, it sounds like they are stockpiling assets and churning them out at a very high level. So that'll be a lot of fun trying to knock heads with those guys. We'll move along. Really unfortunate situation, sad situation out in Big Ten country. Northwestern made a change. Pat Fitzgerald is out. Alleged hazing allegations, very serious allegations. I think that they were originally going to suspend him for 2 weeks, I believe, and then on Monday, a couple of days later, the president stepped in and dismissed Pat. I think there's going to be some legal stuff that they're going to need to sort through, but just a very unfortunate situation. You feel for anyone that might have been impacted. It sounds, the more I hear about it, Johnny, it sounds like it's been going on for a long, long time, even possibly before Fitz was the head coach. So, if you're a Northwestern fan and you're listening to this podcast, hang in there, and hopefully some good times will be ahead. Johnny, Penn State's going to play them September 30th in Evanston, and Penn State was a pretty big favorite before this news broke, but they're in the market for a new head coach, some other things, and obviously you would have to think the transfer portal situation is going to come into play. Pretty hot and heavy regarding Northwestern. Unfortunate situation, though, and Pat Fitzgerald. News is still coming out. One of the great linebackers in modern day Big Ten history. That 95 Northwestern team, he's associated with that. He did some really good things at Northwestern as a head coach, but just just an awful look for Northwestern, an awful look for him, and we're just going to have to wait to see how things play out.
Yeah, really awful situation. And, without hashing out a lot of the details
Yeah.
on this podcast, if any of the listeners want to know more, I would recommend going and reading the Daily Northwestern, the student paper
Yeah.
there. It's done a lot of the reporting, a lot of the forward work on this, support student journalism. It's really chilling stuff, to be frank, and not what you want to see in college athletics whatsoever, on a broad scale. On a more micro scale, looking at the Big Ten, yeah, like you mentioned, Penn State plays Northwestern in Evanston on September 30th. They'll have a new head coach, and yeah, Big Ten Media Day is coming up for us. We'll be there in a couple of weeks now, Bob, and so I'm sure this issue is the situation is not just going to be brushed under the rug. It's going to be addressed in some form or fashion out in Indianapolis. So we'll stay tuned on that, I suppose. But yeah, the initial reporting here, the initial stuff is not great for Pat Fitzgerald or for Northwestern football overall. And yeah, we'll just be keeping an eye on that as it unfolds. But what we know, Pat Fitzgerald out, and a long time, I think James Franklin is now obviously not the situation that you want it to happen or have this, come about, but he's now the second longest tenured coach in the Big Ten behind Kirk Ferentz. So yeah, not great, but something to just keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. Johnny, let's turn our attention to this 2023 Penn State football team, and what might lie in store. But I think the hopes are high. I think inside the program, outside the program, they're going to learn more in August, especially when they get a look at some other players that didn't go in spring, whether they were freshmen that didn't enroll early, whether they were transfer portal guys like Dante Cephas. But it's a good looking talent base. Before I get to some things I have for you, though, I want you to just think about this in the back of your head, because at the very end of the podcast, I have my question answered. I'm going to ask you this question, and I want you, so you have a couple minutes to think about it while I throw some other stuff at you. But just think about who you think is the most talented player on this Penn State team that no one really knows about. So you could go in a lot of directions, and the criteria are essentially flying way under the radar. It could be a year where this player plays a significant role, could play a huge role, could play a not very big role, but the talent is there. So that was kind of my criteria. I whittled my list down to a couple, and I finally arrived at my candidate. So in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to ask you for maybe who your pick is. But I wanted to flip it the other way and talk about some guys that maybe in August or maybe early in the season, are you in or are you out on these players? And for whatever reason, these players are not necessarily young players, but these are players that I think are talented. But sometimes you look at the depth chart, Johnny, and you're like, I'm not really sure how this guy's going to play at Penn State. So anyway, two guys for you, in or out this year. Could you make a case for them seeing the field? I'm going to start with the offensive line. Nick Dawkins is one, upperclassman. J.B. Nelson is another. I think at one point in time, I think there were some pretty grand plans for maybe both these players, and it still might work out. You know what I mean? You just never know when your opportunity is going to come at Penn State. But what would you say right now about those two players?
In terms of seeing the field, in terms of having a role on this team, I would lean more in on Nick Dawkins than JB Nelson, and here's why. Because if there is, I feel like on the offensive line, you've got a pretty veteran core there. Olu, obviously, at left tackle. On the interior, you've got Landon Tengwall and Sal Wormley at guard, and Hunter Norzad as the projected center. Mm-hmm. But if either Tengwall or Wormley pick up an injury, have to miss time, I think the natural thing would be to bump Hunter out to guard, a spot that he played a lot last year. And if they have the faith in Nick Dawkins to then put him at center, I think that would be a natural progression for this offensive line. Again, we're sitting here in July before an August training camp, so we have to couch all of what we're going to say with knowing that. But that's why I would lean Nick Dawkins in this situation. I just think there's a clear path for him to play, because I think if they do lose one of those two guards in any form or fashion, whether it's for 5 snaps or 5 games, I think it's a more viable way to keep continuity on the offensive line. Well, maybe not a continuity, because center is a difference, but I just think with Hunter's experience, I think that could be a move.
Don't you forget about Venga Ione, young man.
I know.
I have been singing this guy's praises. I do agree with you about Nick Dawkins. I've heard he is one of the strongest players on the team. I can remember, whether it's late in games or in the blue-white game 2 years ago, his power is impressive. But you only get to see him, late in games against, when the cause is lost. Maybe not necessarily going against top competition, but he's a powerful guy. As far as Nelson, I think that you're right. If I had to prioritize it, but I wanted to bring those two up just because whenever I think of guys that in or out, and I would have never, I can't say that a year or two ago I could ever have seen Bryce Effner playing at Penn State. And not only did he play, I think he played pretty well for Penn State. Not only in 2022 when he was called upon, but also I think he had to play a little bit in 2021. So that's my point, is that even though they might be buried on the depth chart now, it only takes one or two things to happen, and the next thing you know, you're in the spotlight going against a pretty good defensive line. So those are two I wanted to get for you on the offensive line, Johnny. Now 2 on the defensive line. I think I know where you're going to go here, and I really like one of these players. Keziah Izzard is one. The other one is Smith Vilbert. I think two completely different players, maybe 2 completely different situations, but in or out on those 2 guys, whether it's in August making a move or finding a way to find some kind of piece in the defensive line rotation.
Yeah, I think you probably would lean the same way. I would go with Keziah Izzard here. Right. And I say that because the opportunity at defensive tackle, it's, you have Hakeem Beamon, who has played a lot of ball for you. Devon Elise, and then Izzard and Zane Durant are your top 4. Alonzo Ford coming in, transferring from Old Dominion. I don't see him cracking that 4 this year at least. There's a clear path to playing time for Keziah Izzard, and when he played last year, I thought he did play pretty well. Obviously, missing time early in the season. On the flip side, at defensive end, I don't know. We've talked how much we like Amin Vanover, and he's their 4th guy at defensive end, because you've got Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, Denai Dennis Sutton. I even think Zariah Fisher, him coming back early from that injury last year, getting some playing time towards the tail end of the season was promising for him. If Smith Vilbert decides that every game is the Outback Bowl, then sure. Then maybe
the first half of the Outback Bowl,
yeah. Look, again, it's not, we're not coming down on anyone.
No.
But it's like he has so much to prove, and he has so many talented players ahead of him that I think the defensive end position it's going to be so difficult to pry away snaps from that top 4, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. One thing I just want to, so regarding Keziah Izzard, I was surprised. I think I read some stuff from you. I was off in June when I think you guys got a chance to talk to Franklin and his coaches up in State College. And I think I saw a lot of stories singing the praises of Devon Ellis as maybe the guy opposite Hakeem Beamon. I think from a pure disruption, pure physical standpoint, I kind of thought that Izzard was maybe a little bit further along than he was. And I always felt like when you watch him at the line of scrimmage, he's giving people a lot harder. He's causing more problems, I think, than Devon Ellis did. Maybe Devon Ellis was nursing something last year, but I just think that I think when I say my in or out on Izzard, is he going to be the starter? I think he might be the starter if everything, he's certainly big enough. I know Ellis is a good player too. They both played a lot of football at Penn State. But if you want to talk about upside, I think Izzard's got another level he can get to. And I'm not sure you don't. I think with Ellie's, you're always going to know what you have in him. But I think that there's more because Manny Diaz is a disruptive guy. I think the more disruptive player might be Izzard.
Yeah, and I also think it kind of depends on what team you're facing,
Yep.
because you look at the weight gains over the winter and the summer. The roster reflects in terms of the roster right now. I saw Hakeem Beeman. It says he's up to 284.
Yeah.
How is that a true 284? How much is he going to be able to hold that? Ellie's is up to 302. Izzard 294. And Zane Durant 280. So you've got some different looks in there. I mean, if you're going up against a Michigan or an Iowa that wants to cram it down your throat,
Yeah.
Ellie's and Izzard could be out there together.
Yep.
And so I think it's going to be pretty situational in terms of who starts or maybe even just who plays the most snaps at defensive tackle for them this year. It also depends on if these guys stay healthy throughout August and all that. But I think you're right. I think Izzard has a decent path to being a starter, or at least playing starter level snaps for this team this fall. Whereas Smith Vilbert, I don't think is going to be really close to that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. One more before I get your thoughts on the best player, the most talented player on the Penn State roster that no one's really talking about. I'll posit it to you this way, Johnny. Every time I look at the Penn State wide receiver room, kind of whether they're getting off the bus before a game, whether they're going through pregame warmups, whether we're up there for practice availability, in terms of like guys that are just slapped together, Mylachi Mega is a guy that I'm like, I saw him in 2021. He had a long catch and run touchdown against Rutgers late in the year, but that was his Irv Charles moment. And I think you know what I mean by that. Penn State fans know what I mean by that. Irv Charles was a physically gifted player at Penn State that made one big play for them against Minnesota in 2016 that turned that game around, but we never really heard from him again. And every situation is different. I think Mylachi Mega is a guy that will help them on special teams. But if they're going to play five receivers, and I get the fact that the fifth guy is not going to play a lot, is Mylachi Mega just going to be a special teams guy, or is he a guy they're ever going to trust? Maybe in the second half of a game when they need a big play to be made.
Yeah, you're not giving me a second guy to go up against him. You're just
you can absolutely. This is the beauty of this segment, but I just wanted to focus on him because, I mean. There's some guys that are younger or some guys that have just stepped on campus, but this guy has been at Penn State for a while from Canada, and he looks like he should be a matchup nightmare, but it just hasn't happened. And I just don't know. Usually if you're a receiver after the first or second year, right? And I think it might be his fourth year at Penn State. So I just was curious your thoughts on him. I think that you probably might align with me because I just wonder. He could definitely run. He definitely has size. He's definitely hard to bring down, but something is just not clicking.
Yeah, with Mylachi Mega, I'm out until I'm in.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. And again, you kind of look at the receiver room. They felt the need to go into the transfer portal and get Dante Cephas and Malik McLean, and they were after other guys too. They were trying to bring in even a couple more. And you've got Keandre Lambert-Smith coming back, Harrison Wallace III. Spoiler alert, may or may not be my choice for later, but
I like it.
I think he has a load of talent. Amari Evans flashed. Caden Saunders could take a step up. I just think this training camp is really big for Mylachi Mega if he wants to be more than just a special teams player, because he's been good in that role. But again, that's not why you come to Penn State if you're a high school prospect. You don't come to a big program like that hoping to just be a special teams player. So he has the build. He has in a vacuum what you would want from a wide receiver. It's just a matter of putting it together and having a consistent camp. And if he's able to do that and grow into the season as it goes, we've talked about how Penn State has a pretty soft opening schedule. At least I think they do. Could provide an opportunity for a guy to grow into the season as September and October rolls in. And so maybe he's able to do that, but I'm out until I'm in on Mylachi Mega.
Fair, John. Fair. All right. Before we get out of here, I want to get back to what I talked to you about. Um, just if you had to pick one player, and it doesn't matter where he is on the depth chart, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm assuming this player is not going to be a 50-year player, but who's the most physically gifted player in your mind right now? We can change our minds. Late in the fall, most physically gifted player on the Penn State roster right now that no one's really talking about or no one even knows about. It could be either one.
Yeah, I think Trey Wallace has what you want in a game breaking receiver. You've seen flashes of it, that deep ball at Michigan last year, and so I think he has the talent. I think he has the speed. He's shown the ball tracking ability. And Drew Aller has as big as an arm as they come for a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
So if and when, and they're going to have to at some point unleash that arm, they're not going to be able to. Maybe early in the season they'll be able to run the ball 50 times, get in, get out with wins.
Yeah.
But I think if you're going to want to beat Ohio State and beat Michigan, you're going to have to let Drew Aller cook. And I think a guy who could could be on the receiving end of some of those deep balls would be Harrison Wallace. And so I think he can really be, if he puts it together, I think he can be a real matchup nightmare for secondaries, for defenses, especially if you have Theo Johnson going over the middle and you've got Dante Cephas working out of the slot potentially with, Keandre Lambert-Smith. We've talked before about his, catch and run ability. And so if Harrison Wallace gets some one-on-one matchups, especially if you have Nick Singleton, Katron Allen in the run game, I think he can make defenses pay. And I'm looking forward to seeing if he can, back up how I'm hyping him up right now, because I do think he has the talent to be that kind of guy.
Yeah, I do like him a lot. I think we haven't seen the best of him. I like Omari Evans a lot too. I think it's going to be a pretty fascinating August between Keandre, Harrison, Omari, Dante. I mean, if all four of those guys progress, the talent's already there, right? So this wide receiver room can get good. And all right, the answer to that question for me though is I'm going deep. I am going deep. I guarantee you, if you asked anyone else on the Penn State beat, no one would give the answer that I'm going to give right now. I'm going to go to the safety room, and I'm going to tell you it's Mekhi Flowers, the kid from Harrisburg. Began his career at Steel High, finished it at CD East, played receiver and defensive back at the prep level, probably better known as a receiver. This kid was not scared once he went up in class, played for CD East, played against some good teams. And he was a high 4-star recruit in that recruiting class. He's up to almost 200 pounds now. I think he's gained almost 20 pounds since he got on campus. I talked to him. He was not really ready physically last year, and he admitted that. He looks a lot different now. I know, even though they lost Jair Brown, it's a crowded room at safety to make an impact. And if you're going to talk about young safeties, you're probably everyone, and rightfully so, wants to talk about Kevin Winston, and I think he could have a huge year. I think Keaton Ellis is going to play a lot. Zakee Wheatley is a guy that he might be the best ball hawk of all the safeties, and I think he's shown that when he played last year. Jalen Reed's another guy they like. Jalen Reed has had trouble, I think, staying healthy at Penn State, but I think he is definitely a guy that in run support will make his presence felt. I think, though, I will say this, if Mekhi Flowers gets a chance to crack the top four at safety, whether it's injury or anything else, I think physically he has the skills to be an impact player. It might not be this year. It probably will be on special teams. And I know they have 2 or 3 young safeties that are in their first year. I just think this kid is a really talented kid. And once he got over the physical hurdles last year, James Franklin actually alluded to it at the blue-white game when he was asked about how they stacked all the players on the blue side and not on the white side. He said, I kind of disagree with that. If you look, Jalen Reed didn't play in that game. We had 2 good safeties on the blue team. We had 2 good safeties on the white team, and Winston and Flowers were the safeties on the white team, and he had a big game. So I just think he's a guy that no one really knows about him right now, but if he ever gets a chance, I think that he will really be a good player at Penn State.
Yeah, I can see that. It's just it's a matter of fighting his way through a lot of guys, but he certainly has the talent to do it, and That's what August training camp is for,
I
Bob.
know.
We're going to be there soon enough too. I mean, we're less than a month away from, I'm
Yeah.
assuming, Penn State Media Day in State College and the start of camp. So it's
Yeah.
going to be an opportunity for guys like Flowers and Harrison Wallace and all these players, Malik Mig, all these players we talked about today to really make their mark.
Johnny, real quick, don't forget Saturday up in State College with the Spikes. It's Sean Clifford bobblehead day.
That's my birthday, Bob. I'm gonna be celebrating my birthday down in Sea Isle City, New Jersey. I will not.
I didn't know. I didn't know if you were going to pass through or you just wanted to get. There's a couple different bobbleheads they're going to give out, but it is Sean for the fans. It is Sean Clifford bobblehead day up in State College for the State. I think it's the Spikes, State College Spikes. But I'm sure Sean will be there, so get maybe one of your last chances to catch him because he's going to be in Green Bay for the foreseeable future. So just check that out, and also check out all our stuff on PennLive. Johnny's recruiting stuff. Look ahead to a couple of his stories that he talked about recruiting wise earlier in the week. We're even though it seems like it's slow, it's never State football.